there's a price to pay. And for me, I couldn't get that all reconciled until I found a place where, once again, as a 10-year-old, I felt something like someone was going to let me lead music, and it was okay. It may be my job at Soulforce is nothing more than leading music. I'm not sure. The second story I want to tell you about putting faith in action in my life, you may have heard before. It's Barbara Kingsolver's story. It's not mine. She tells about this village of people who've been blessed with abundance. She actually calls it heaven and hell. And the gods have provided a gigantic community bowl of soup, enough for everyone to eat and to be filled. And the only requirement of the villagers is they have to eat with a spoon that is 6 feet long. One group of people, she says they're in hell, I don't know, have a way of thinking, a rigidity that says they must lift their own spoon, bring it to their own mouth, and eat. Well, a 6-foot-long spoon, that doesn't work. So they were starving to death. The other group of people, who were slightly less rigid in their thinking, saw the spoon, sat across the table just like you are right here, and fed each other. And they were no longer hungry. You know, the second thing about putting faith in action in my life was I had to decide that the way I was thinking might not be the only possibility. That there might be other ways to get fed, and for other people to get fed, than what I understood. Third story. Not mine either. Stolen. There was a time when God lived at the end of a road that passed between two villages. The people in the two villages did not get along very well. Resources were very limited. There was a terrible drought. People were thirsty, and they were hot. God woke up one morning and decided to walk down the road between the two villages and wear his largest hat. It would provide shade and shelter and comfort to the people. God starts walking. The villagers on the one side, on the east, say, "Look, God is here bringing cool shade, and he's wearing this amazing red hat." Villagers on the west look up. "Look, God is here. He is bringing shade and comfort, and he is wearing this amazing blue hat." Villagers here shout across the road at the villagers here, "No, God's hat is not blue. God's hat is red." Villagers here shout across the road, "No, God's hat is not red, it is blue." Within a few moments, and before God even made it to the end of the road, they had picked up their rakes and shovels and the stones laying in the field and were preparing to kill each other over the perception that God's hat was red or blue. God turns, begins to walk back down the road, and a small child, not yet corrupted by the influences of rigidity or preference, says, "Actually, God's hat is red and blue. Red on one side, blue on the other." The real point, of course, was that God's hat was big enough to shelter them all. We land in a particular place. We decide to stay right where we are, or we get up and go find people. Once we find them, we have to decide whether we're willing to share a spoon or not. And we have to decide that we have faith that God is enough. In a world where those things happen, people don't kill other people because they identify themselves as gay. Or, as we know today based on the research of women around the world, they don't allow women who have been raped in the midst of war zones to be stigmatized, excluded, and ruined by their spouses and community. In a world where we land, go out, share, and know that God is enough, those things don't happen. I'm guessing just from the looks of us, there are a lot of church people in here, affiliated at some point in your life or today with a church. Are you willing to confess that? Okay. I'm here because I believe we have to call the church universal, in all of its renditions, to accountability for the way the church has participated in the violence of exclusion, in the violence of stigmatization, in persecution, and in the isolation of people we are actually called to serve. The reason I'm qualified has nothing to do with that incredible introduction that Ross read. I'm qualified because I participated in spiritual violence against my own brother when he was diagnosed in 1987 with AIDS. I was still in the closet. I'd spent most of my growing up years trying to dissociate myself from him because he caused so much trouble in my Church of Christ family. He was gay and proud in Abilene, Texas, if you can imagine such a thing. For a long time, I didn't even acknowledge my own deepest core reality, that I was like my brother. A gender non-conforming, gay, homosexual, whatever it is you want to call me. I didn't want to be that because that meant I was like him. And my family and my church didn't want to have anything to do with him. And my neighbors didn't want to have anything to do with him. And I didn't want to be left out. I liked my chair and my pina colada. I didn't want to go. So I hid out. Then one day my brother Patrick called me and asked if I could come to Dallas to see him, and he'd never asked me to do anything for him before, for good reason. I probably wouldn't have. And when I got there, he asked me to go with him to an appointment at Harris Hospital, and I did, and a doctor there handed me a pamphlet, just like that, and said, "Your brother has autoimmune deficiency disease and he will be dead in months. You guys need to make arrangements." I'd never heard of AIDS. I didn't think there was anything that couldn't be addressed by a doctor somewhere. But I was wrong. My brother died. We moved him home with us to Abilene a few months before his death. We hid him out. Mostly, we lied to all of our friends and neighbors and said he had cancer. And during this time, my son Joshua, who was 13, watched all of us, his mom, his family, his community, and his church, exclude a member of our own family from our fellowship. So after my brother died, my son attempted suicide. And when we took him to the hospital, we learned that he too identified as gay. And we were so untrustworthy and so fearful, such silly, lost souls, that he was afraid to tell us the truth and convinced there was no life for him amongst us. It turns out okay. He's 38 now. He's a chaplain. He's doing great. But that night, I changed. My fear was killing my child, and stigma and silence and discrimination within my church and society had already contributed to the death of my brother. We were 30 years too late doing research and the right medications here in this country, so we lost a whole generation of gay men.